It's Monday night, and you know what that means. The Jersey First Television Network probably brings to you the latest edition of Real Talk. And yes, I am New Jersey's premier and now 10-time award-winning journalist. Top Latino is voted on by the Latino Spirit Online magazine, along with the United States Latino Affairs Initiative. And certainly, ladies and gentlemen, I'll continue to be the weapon of mass disruption in Garden State media, because guess what? I'll continue to be the people's choice and the people's voice. That's right. It's me, the generational talent in media, folks. Fernando Uribe. Happy Monday to you all here. As you join us here on the 9th of December as 2024 continues on, folks. We're wrapping up the year strong here on the program. And I do want to thank you all for tuning in from wherever and however you may be doing so right now on Facebook Live via StreamYard, also on the Jersey First YouTube page, along with LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter Live, and all of our social media platforms. And again, folks, if you haven't done so already, we appreciate your support on all of our platforms. Don't forget to like us, of course, on Facebook. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and Twitter. And for all you YouTube subscribers, and I'm sure you're on YouTube for some reason, folks. You're either looking up recipes for the upcoming holiday dinners. Maybe you're looking for travel destinations. You're listening to podcasts like this one or others. Again, we appreciate you subscribing to the Jersey First Television Network on YouTube. Again, it takes a few seconds. Like, comment, and share tonight's episode on all of your platforms. And of course, whether you get your podcast on Spotify or SoundCloud, download Jersey First TV and take it with you anywhere at any time, whether you're doing Christmas shopping, whether you're walking your dog, as this weather's getting freaky, right? It was freezing last week. It's going to be 60 degrees this week. Folks, bundle up and take care of yourselves. It's the easiest way to get ill during this holiday season. We don't want you doing that. And of course, take Jersey First TV with you anywhere at any time. Folks, I can't say enough how proud I am to be on the dream team of Garden State Media. That's right, folks. It's the Jersey First Television Network. And of course, brand new episodes of the Nader Narrative premiere every Thursday, which are hosted by the amazing Elizabeth Nader, and brand new episodes of Bridging the Gap, hosted by millennial superstars AJ Melillo and Steven Rumbolo, premiere every Thursday. And of course, every Monday night, check your local listings, of course, for brand new episodes live in the living color of Real Talk with Fernando Uribe right here on Jersey First TV. Folks, you want us to go over final thoughts? I got a lot to say about, some of the, TDS still going on in New Jersey, especially in some in media, certainly a lot in activism, some elected officials. But of course, specifically, I'm going to have a lot to say about one nonprofit in New Jersey that I guess just continues to just be insufferable, and that's the Latina Action PAC. A little bit more on these insufferable ladies a little bit later in the program. You don't want to miss out on that one, folks. So stay tuned again. Like, comment, and share here on Real Talk with Fernando Uribe here on the Jersey First Television Network. Folks, it's interesting because, here on the show, I like to talk to everybody. I talk to elected officials. I talk to candidates. I talk to activists. And of course, one of the things I always like to talk about on the program, right, is the evolution of media, and quite frankly, how thankful I am to all of you that continue to support Real Talk with Fernando Uribe here on the Jersey First Television Network. Great traffic once again for the month of November, 72,000 and counting, folks. All organic numbers here on the show. Again, I'm not the most humble guy around, but I got to tell you, I'm going to be humbled by all of your support as Real Talk will enter year 5 in just a few weeks here on the Jersey First Television Network. And again, without all of you, folks, these numbers behind me, that success that I enjoy wouldn't be possible without all of you. So I love you. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Again, happy holidays and Merry Christmas to everybody who continues to support Real Talk right here on the Jersey First Television Network. Folks, it's been a few weeks since the election, and obviously there's a lot to go around and dissect about what kind of went wrong during this election cycle, how people are getting information, who they're getting information from, and quite frankly, why they're getting it. And of course, there's always discussion and debate about how we get our information in this digital age that we're living in, especially when it comes to media and journalism. And you know what? When we think about that, what better person to talk to than the chair of the School of Communication and Information at my alma mater, Rutgers University in New Brunswick. And folks, many great years I had during my undergraduate days in New Brunswick and certainly my graduate days in Newark. Hey, it's always good to talk to a fellow member of the Rutgers community. And folks, he is Professor John Pavlik, joins us here live on Real Talk. Professor, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's a great pleasure to be on Real Talk. I really welcome this opportunity to speak with you. And, thinking about how media are changing is really such a vital topic. So thanks again for having me on. I will point out I'm no longer chair. I'm just Professor Pavlik now.
Okay. Oh, I appreciate you correcting me, Professor. I appreciate that. But
they keep changing, so I'm just professor, and I'm happy to be professor. That's really a good role for me.
All that, listen, a lot of work there being chair, right? So I think it's nice to kind of like unwind a little bit and kind of, again, enjoy teaching like you do without sort of the bureaucracy, I think, that kind of encompasses that job.
That's
right?
Exactly it. I love the contact with the students. That is the best thing about this job.
Absolutely. And again, folks, if you're not familiar with this exceptional program in Rutgers, New Brunswick, you can go to their website, comminfo.rutgers.edu, an amazing program down in New Brunswick, the School of Communication and Information there, obviously. Now, John, I got to ask you, though, for our viewers today that are not familiar with the School of Communication and Information, there's a lot of different programs around in the tri-state area. Obviously, when I went to New Brunswick and for my undergraduate degrees, obviously it had nothing to do with journalism, had nothing to do with communications, but we've seen this program really grow. And what's the argument to be made about why the School of Communication and Information at Rutgers is arguably one of the best in the region?
Well, our school, as you say, has really grown, and we're doing very well. And it's made up of 3 different departments that include communication, information science, and journalism and media studies. And that's my area. And so, I think that it's really that combination, that interdisciplinary combination that allows us to study and teach about the whole world of communication, information, and media from different points of view. I think that's really our greatest strength. So I think that's what we bring to the equation.
Now, when we think about media, communications, and journalism, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, John, I think that sometimes there's, and it's not like an intentional, but I think at times maybe there's a conflation of what these disciplines entail, because they're not all the same. I mean, if we're talking about communications and information and journalism and media studies, I would argue that I think they're very different disciplines. Yes, certainly I think the end game is to produce great students that ultimately can become great journalists, great members within the communications community. But I think it's very easy to sort of conflate all these disciplines together when, let's be fair, I think they all stand out in their own way. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. I mean, they are distinct, but we all kind of are in one general, discipline. But in communication, they teach a lot of things such as organizational communication and public relations and things and speech communication and all that. But in information science, they also teach about library science and data science. And then in my area, journalism and media, what really distinguishes us is we focus on teaching students how to be content creators and producers. So that's, I'm really reducing to a great degree, but that's sort of our 3 different areas that we focus on.
And it's interesting you bring up library studies. I mean, listen, from my day there down in New Brunswick, I mean, Alexander Library, there were days, John, that I used to live in there. I mean, studying for finals, having to work on papers. I mean, I got to know the inner workings of Alexander Library very well, way into the late hours of the evening. For as many students, I think, obviously live that experience as well.
Yeah, we're right. Our buildings are right next to Alexander Library, and that's really wonderful for us and for our students to have that resource so available. Although now a lot of it, in terms of research, is online, so you don't necessarily have to physically go there. But it's great to be able to go there and have meetings or do your research or have other things that might take place in Alexander Library in the physical space.
And it's interesting because, again, I think one of the best dynamics I remember from grad school, though, John, and again, even at Rutgers Newark, where you could access the Rutgers libraries from all 3 campuses just from your home. And the idea of having to trek out in the snow or the rain and have to go to the library. I mean, it's interesting about these developments in technology where before, and again, I'm listen, for everybody at home, I'm kind of dating myself here. I kind of remember card catalogs. I remember having to go to the card catalogs and look for books that way. I remember this. So it's not like it's foreign to me,
Well, one thing I will point out is we do a lot of our teaching in person, but we also do a lot online now.
Sure.
And especially what I teach a lot of online, and especially in our master's program. And we have a lot of students in the master's degree who are full-time professionals. And so really coming to campus is not always feasible for them, given the fact they might work all day. So by having an online kind of asynchronous platform, they can dive into the course 10 p.m. and it doesn't matter, it's whatever works for them. And so that's one of the real advantages to having that kind of flexibility. And a lot of our courses are hybrid. So there might be an in-person part, but also an online component. And so having that flexibility increasingly is what students want, and it's what they need, because so many of them also work, or even undergraduates, they may have internships. And so they may be really tied up, a lot of their days or even evenings may be tied up with internships, and being able to do a hybrid course gives them some flexibility too in terms of how they study.
And listen, I've seen some success stories in literally in full color. Obviously, Joey Block, the host of In the Middle with Fox Sports Radio New Jersey, is a Rutgers graduate. I believe he's a graduate from the School of Communication and Information. So when I look at someone like Joey Block, a fellow podcaster, excelling in his field, I mean, it's like, well, really, are we surprised? Right? He's coming from the School of Communication and Information in New Brunswick. Now, John, whether it was in your capacity as chair or even before, what are some of the best advancements that you have seen with this program? Not necessarily just curriculum, but has it been, the ability to get funding and make sure that the university gives the students in these programs the best technology possible, the best core resources possible? What can you brag about, really, about what's happened with the school, let's say, in the last 10 years?
Well, one of the things that we're really excited about is we've been able to hire some new faculty who bring very strong backgrounds in production. And a lot of our curriculum is increasingly focusing on media production, being able to produce audio and video content at a high level. And that's really, valued in the marketplace today. So for our students, it serves them well. But by hiring faculty who are award-winning documentary makers, for example, to come in and teach these courses, that is, I think, something that really is helping our program go to a whole new level of excellence for the students. So I would point to that as one really good illustration of one of the ways we've been able to continue to develop in terms of our quality.
And that's what I'm saying. Folks, if you're just joining us live right now, real quick, like, comment, and share tonight's episode as distinguished professor John Pavlik from Rutgers University in the School of Communication and Information joins us live here tonight. Again, for more information about the program, if you're interested in enrolling or have a family member that might be interested as well, go to comminfo.rutgers.edu. John, I was so happy that, again, you were coming on in December, right after the election. I've been on a lot of shows here, doing a lot of dissections. I've been involved in a lot of autopsy discussions about this election cycle. And what's really interesting, what I've been hearing and again, exit polling data really isn't going to be, I think, definitive for another few months. But I think what we saw, though, John, a few weeks back, leading up to the election, and even since then, the post-mortem period, depends on what side of the aisle. I mean, obviously, I'm ecstatic about what happened on November the 5th. But I think that there's something to be said, though, about the way that voters were getting their information. And we talked about briefly before we went on the air. I mean, listen, I'm an old school guy. I grew up, loving to buy newspapers on Sundays. I love going to the store, picking up the Bergen Record. It may look like a dissertation. Same thing with the New York Times or even the Daily News. And I enjoy that. I enjoyed physically, reading the paper, reading the comics. I'm a kid. I love reading comics, reading the sports, reading the editorials. And, again, that was like a happening for me every weekend or whenever I was able to go buy the Sunday paper. But what we've seen, I think, and I'll just talk about New Jersey. I don't want to sort of paint with a broad brush nationally, but what we've been seeing in New Jersey, I think, is the electorate, in many respects, some are losing faith in media, in establishment media. And again, listen, I feel bad for the printers, for the carriers, for people who work in the advertising and everything else. Like, believe me, Tom Moran being unemployed, I'm not crying over. But I feel bad for the Ledger as an institution, as a newspaper, dying out, essentially. The Jersey Journal, where I live in Hudson County, it's been around for 157 years. That dying out as well. And again, I feel bad for some of the staff. I don't feel bad for the editor also, joining Tom Moran in the unemployment line. But I feel bad for those families, those people that worked hard to produce the paper. But what we've been seeing, though, John, and to be fair, I think voters across all demographics, Black, white, men and women, Hispanics, I think we're losing some confidence in the establishment media, which I think has given to a rise in podcasts. Case in point, I watch everything. I watch left-leaning podcasts like the Young Turks, the Majority Report, I also watch right-leaning podcasts, Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, Dan Bongino, Joe Rogan. I watch everything in the middle. I think voters are gravitating more and more so to podcasting. I think they're getting away from traditional media, which again is disappointing though, John. And for someone like you teaching about journalism and communications, when you see these demographics drifting away from traditional media, how does it make you feel, sir?
Well, as you say, I do have really, a lot of regret for the industry of journalism, because such a great legacy in New Jersey. And a colleague of mine who's passed away now, but Jerry Amente, a great professor, wrote a book about the history of journalism in New Jersey. And it's a wonderful history. And I hate to see any of that that might be in decay. How, on the other hand, the public still wants quality news and information. The question is how they want to get it. And lifestyles have changed. People now, they don't want to pick up a printed product too much anymore. What they really want is to have it on their mobile device. And they want the mobile device of their choice, whether it's a tablet or a smartphone, whether it's audio or video. I mean, a lot of podcasts now are video podcasts, and a lot of people like that. And it really means what the public wants is news when and where and how they want it. And they want things, in that form. They don't want to have to wait till the paper comes out anymore. They don't want to wait for the, schedule the broadcasting. They really want stuff on demand increasingly. And, that's where I think there's opportunity for innovation. I teach my students in my classes about innovating with digital media. And I think there's a huge opportunity in New Jersey to do some of that innovating, to create new forms of content that are delivered on mobile platforms, wearable platforms, and a whole host of possibilities. So I think that definitely the public is looking for content that comes to them in the form they want it. And they don't want to have to go back to the old ways so much. There's still a place. I mean, sometimes, there may be some niche products, some weekly papers and things of that nature. And I commend the journalists who have worked so hard for so many years and doing great reporting. We need now, though, to start getting that reporting more and more in this new digital environment where the public lives.
John, to your point about what I think the way people are getting information, and I think to some extent, not to say that they're losing faith, but I think how they get it is certainly one path. And again, I don't want to get too ideological here, but again, as a conservative myself, I mean, I think that pundits like myself and others, it's red meat for me. And it's basically a softball being thrown down the middle of the plate for me when we're seeing, let's say, at the national level and even statewide, that establishment media isn't, in some instances, not being very trustworthy. In some cases, even outright lying to us. So for someone like me, it's like, oh, I'm getting a fastball down the middle of the plate to swing at when I'm seeing, let's say, the editorial board at the Star-Ledger just becoming literally full-blown propaganda machines for one party. So, for someone like myself, I mean, what's the rebuttal when you hear, and I'm sure you read a lot, obviously, maybe some students bring it up in class, I'm not sure, but, a conservative might just say, hey, Professor Pavlik, like, let's be honest, the establishment media has been lying to us, whether it's at the national level, look at this election cycle, look what's going on in New Jersey. They're not being honest with us. So of course people are turning on them and they're going to alternative resources for information. Is this too much hysteria on my part, or am I onto something?
Well, I mean, there's an element of truth in what you're saying, in that people want to know when they see something that's presented as news or fact that it is impartial, that they can trust it. Now, on the opinion side, it may be a different matter. It needs to be clearly labeled as such. But we are starting to see a shift. I don't know about in New Jersey specifically, but there were a couple of national examples: the Washington Post, the LA Times, where they decided not to endorse a candidate for president. And that shook up the industry. But maybe the public wants to have maybe less time spent on getting that kind of opinion leadership and more time spent on just getting factual information, original reporting. Original reporting is hard and it's expensive and it's challenging to get the facts straight and to find those stories and then to do good storytelling. And I think if media can put more of their resources into that, I think the public will probably respond well to quality news and quality information and good storytelling. They don't want to have stuff that's, going to be uninteresting. They want it presented in a compelling way. And sometimes that means short nuggets, but it also means put it into a form like a video podcast so they can get it while they're working out, or, whatever the, the current situation might be.
It's interesting you bring up about sort of like maybe making it briefer and again, shortening the way that the information is being disseminated. Again, listen, I love a good news article, but do I really need a 5,000 word, editorial when maybe 2,000 will do, or a brief 2 or 3 minute video? I mean, again, listen, I've always prided myself on being a good writer, going back to my days in grad school. But John, I mean, again, I know my strengths. I feel I'm a better speaker, and hence, which is why I love podcasting. Could I write? Could I be sort of the traditional print journalist? I could do that. I feel confident in my writing, but I just feel that this is my niche. And this is a softball down the middle of the plate for me. I can talk for hours. Having said that, again, in your capacity as an academic, again, you teach about media, you teach about communications and information and journalism. Is there a part of you, I think, that maybe is disappointed that we're seeing so much backlash against media? I mean, case in point, I mean, what was sort of one of the biggest outliers during this election cycle in terms of tidbits or clickbait or whatever? Well, it was the fact that, 4 years ago, social media or big tech were silencing people on social media about information out there. Case in point, for example, the Hunter Biden laptop, which for years it was, it's right-wing hysteria, and people like Uribe in New Jersey are just, they're just hyperbolic. And it turns out that I was right, and so were many on my side of the aisle. But however, that became a big talking point about maybe being anti-media. For someone like you as an academic that hears these talking points, how disappointing is that?
Well, it's disappointing to think that the public may be turning away from quality journalism that is produced in a traditional form. And I would hope that we find a way to bring the audience and journalists back together in a positive way, where the content and the dialogue, there's a lot of room for interactivity in journalism and being more responsive to the public. And so I think there are real opportunities there. And I would say that, doing things in a way that's kind of layered is a smart way to go, where you can give the audience a summary. It can have it in audio or video form. And then people who want more depth can have a much longer version, so they can get as much detail as they want. And something else I would like to see it's possible, and I've been arguing media should do this, is put in wherever possible, for every fact that you've inserted in your story, the source, and let people see where does that come from, so they can check it out. They don't have to take your word for it. You've got a source. I make my students do that in my classes. They have to always put sources for whatever they present to the class. They have to put a source for it. And now that's not that hard to do. And so I think journalism could do a much better job of it. Sometimes they call it transparency, but whatever you want to call it, putting in the sources so the public can see, where does this information come from? How have you checked it? And are there different points of view on that? Because some things are complicated, and it would be very helpful sometimes to be able to say, well, this is where we got this piece of information, but there's one source that says this and another one says, differently. And you give them access to both of those sources. And then the public, I think, can make up their mind, because frequently the public's really smart and they have a lot to say and they bring a lot to the equation. So giving them the access to your source, the sources that you used, I think that's a win for everybody.
I'm with you. Folks, if you just joined us right now, it's 6:23 here on the East Coast. My guest tonight, distinguished professor at the School of Communication and Information at Rutgers University in New Brunswick, my good friend, Dr. John Pavlik, joins us live here now on Real Talk. Folks, like, comment, and share real quick, and show your support for Real Talk on the Jersey First Television Network. John, we were talking about, obviously, sort of the evolution of media. Obviously, we've seen the rise of podcasting, but very much the way that traditional print media has been sort of dying this slow death. What have we seen? For example, in New Jersey, we've seen a rise in not alternative media, but I think more digital media. Case in point, all the tapintos.nets that really are rising in New Jersey, as well as the patches. What have you seen from any data maybe that the school has compiled or studied about, let's say, the success? Now, again, the business models may differ from Tap Into to Patch and et cetera, as opposed to, the Ledger, the Bergen Record, NorthJersey.com, the Trentonian, and just Spotlight News, those news sites, what are you seeing, if anything, about this maybe desire for people to sort of maybe just be more reliant on smaller news operations digitally, like a Tap Into or a Patch?
I think there's a lot of data that suggests that that's exactly what's happening, is the public is increasingly turning to some of these digital first kind of operations that don't have an analog parent organization. They're a digital operation entirely. And that really makes a lot of sense because, there's no need to produce it and put it into some other form like a printed product. You can deliver it digitally, you gather it digitally, you can use your phone to capture audio or video. And there are a lot of digital tools now that enable you to produce content efficiently and cost effectively and focus on getting the facts correct and getting things right. So I think that's really where it's at for the public too. The public, that's kind of how they live. They are on social media all day. I think the latest data show the average person spends more than 10 hours a day with a screen. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing, and a lot of that is maybe wasted, just a waste of time. But it means people are spending a lot of their waking hours in front of a screen. And journalism needs to be part of that. And they're not necessarily going to want to go to a dedicated news site. They want to see some of that content flow through the places where they are, so that it's convenient for them. And when something's important, it'll reach them and they can then, comment on it or share it. But I think it's critically important that it be vetted for reliability. It's so easy for misinformation to be slipped in there, or disinformation even. And sometimes public can be misled. And so, we need to have a very, I think, good teaching about digital literacy, so people know how to recognize misinformation when they see it or hear it, and not be fooled, and not just quickly share something because it's provocative when in fact it's a deep fake or something like that. And that's been a big problem in New Jersey. There've been a lot of deep fakes that have been really damaging to people. So I think it's important that the public be well informed. That's one of our new course offerings, the whole program in disinformation detox, we call it. So that's something else that's been a real contribution of our school.
It's interesting to bring that up because, again, during this election cycle, what was one of the biggest talking points by pundits on, and take your pick, fill in the blank cable news channel, whatever it was, right? Or podcasters in general. I think it was like sort of how you look at misinformation and or disinformation. And John, to be fair, I mean, again, I don't want to be overly combative here, but could that also be ideological? Because again, I'm not saying I mean this generically for anybody out there, what you consider misinformation, I might be like, no, we've been saying this for years. I was called a conspiracy theorist and I'm right about this. And look, boom, I was proven right. And vice versa. Does it get ideological when it comes to that?
Oh, it can, definitely. It can get ideological, and we need to try to, avoid that or identify when it happens. And in fact, I have a lot of students here's one of the things that I do that may be unique to my courses, or, maybe not unique, but it's something that I do and not everybody does this, is I have them work on projects. And one of the projects, they have to develop an innovative idea using digital media to do something that has a benefit to society. And one of the first questions I often ask them if they want to do something in the realm of misinformation, so how are you going to measure that? How are you going to define that? It can't just be your opinion that it's misinformation. You have to have some way to actually provide evidence that if something's misinformation, how do you actually validate that so it isn't ideological? Because that would be very easy to happen. So I agree with you completely that it's very simple matter for it to become ideologically defined. So there needs to be other ways to identify it. And one of the things I do is I tell the students, well, one way to think about it is, what are the sources that are used, and how have you been able to verify that this is true in comparing, say, multiple sources or going to original sources and verifying it that way. So I think that's what for me is really the key is, if you're going to claim that it's misinformation, well, you need to have a mechanism to do that. And one of the ways to do that is to look at the sources and vet it from more than one source, so that, and they have to be, different kind of sources. If you just take two, biased sources, yeah, they might agree with each other. So you really need to, triangulate to get a reliable measure of whether something's mis or disinformation based on the source and comparing the cross sources.
It's interesting to bring that up because, again, I love to read, and I think you're onto something really, really important here about the fact that I think the way we produce journalism and having those sources in there where, again, you make it as easy as possible for the reader to not go crazy looking around like, you don't have to sort of change the page or open a new tab and, go on Google, whatever. The point is to have those links there available. It's almost like basically it's like writing a term paper. You obviously, you need it there academically for academic integrity purposes, but you want those sources right there. You can be able to look at them right away and say, hey, okay, boom, here's what this article is referencing, and here's the source, boom, right there for your consumption.
And I think the public would really respond to that. They would appreciate knowing, they drew from these 7 sources and here they are. I can go and look more closely at those rather than just, take my word for it. I fact checked.
Now, it's interesting, again, John, I've been a political junkie for as long as I can remember. I've always been reading about politics. My dad got me into reading about it early in my life and reading newspapers. And it's interesting because, like, looking at this election cycle, I just think back to 20 years ago, right? And people might say, "Oh, that's not too long." No, it really isn't that far back. But think about just the way, in this example, how election coverage has changed. If we look back 20 years ago to the 2004 election between the incumbent president, George W. Bush, and his Democrat Party challenger, John Kerry, again, there was no Facebook yet. There was no Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, whatever. Obviously, the internet was still, obviously it was ongoing. But what were we relying on? We were relying on websites from these digital news sites, the New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, Chicago Tribune, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, all the stuff that I read, I've been reading for years. And it was a very different election cycle. Yes, we had 24-hour cable news because we had seen the rise of it in the 90s from Fox News to MSNBC. CNN had really been in the game for over 40 years already, up at that point, up to this point now. But it was a very different election cycle. I think the way that election was covered between Bush and Kerry, and now think about 20 years later, I mean, it was such an influx, John. I mean, every waking moment, whether it was cable news, whether it's on our smartphones, my goodness, there was never a shortage of ads. Never mind getting text messages at all hours of the day on our smartphones, like, oh, by the way, have you signed up with Tim Walz or Kamala Harris or Donald Trump or JD Vance? And it was weird, but I think that just looking at the way this election was covered because of social media, and I think for the foreseeable future, every election cycle, I would argue that social media, while it's been, listen, it's made the world smaller, it's enabled us to communicate with people much more expediently. I think it's also made us very vulnerable, John, to the idea that we become so dependent on these devices and what's on them that I think people, to some extent, are losing the willingness to do their own research. Is that fair to say?
Well, I don't think people have ever really wanted to do a lot of research usually. They'd rather just, get things that they can trust. But if they no longer can trust it, well, then they don't have any choice but to start doing more research. I think back to the great 1938 War of the Worlds broadcast, right, in New Jersey, right, where the panic happened for a lot of people. And it was mostly people who didn't do any research. They just thought, oh, my gosh, the Martians are invading. And people need to have some critical ability, and they need to be able to do research and take some of that initiative. But we also need to have trustworthy sources so that, when you're busy and you have a very busy day and you're a parent and you have to get the children off to school and you don't have you have a job, you don't have a lot of time to be doing research. So we have to respect that. But I think that, there's a role for the media to help with that process. And I think media can help do some of that research and to share when the research has been done and say, you want more about this story? Here's a section of just research that we've done, and we share it with you. So, I think there are different ways media can help and draw in the public into the process of research. So the public, it doesn't become an onerous task if you have to research every piece of information you encounter. But when you want more information, media can help make that available.
John, are we sort of drifting away from this sort of perception I think that many have had for years that the media just tends to be overtly liberal? And now it's, I think, maybe trending in different directions where there's just all forms of media.
I think that's absolutely happened. And now we have, well, and it's kind of, you have to look, depends on what kind of time frame you're looking at it. If you go back to the colonial days of America, when Rutgers was founded in 1766, the colonial press was very partisan. So then over time, a nonpartisan approach to press took shape in the 19th century with the rise of the penny press and the need to get mass audiences that would then get the paper for like a penny, the penny press, and then advertising would be what paid for the press. And so we saw a new model kind of evolve. And now here in the 21st century, we're seeing some more evolution in the nature of the media system. And I think we're seeing a media system that can accommodate a breadth of points of view. And the fear that I have, though, is that people will just go into the one area where everything they see agrees with, their point of view, and they won't get exposed to anything else. That, I think, would be harmful for democracy. I think people, you and I are exceptions. We may have our point of view, but we also go to other points of view media. And I think that's my one concern is I think it's good that we have media with different perspectives, but I hope the public doesn't wind up just sticking with one, point of view, because that would be bad for having a dialogue. We need to have a dialogue, and the public needs to learn that, well, this is one way to see it, and somebody else might see it differently. And let's have I hope that we have an opportunity for the public to see things from different perspectives.
Well said there, Professor. Well said. Folks, if you just joined us right now, it's 6:36 here on the East Coast. My guest tonight is distinguished professor at the School of Communication and Information at Rutgers University in New Brunswick. The great John Pavlik joins us here live on Real Talk. John, let me ask you this, because let's get back to the evolution of journalism. And we've talked off the air about this. I know we've covered it in other episodes, but where I live in Hudson County, there's a great journalist by the name of Al Sullivan, and I continue to call him the dean of Hudson County journalism. He's been in the business for he's been in the business longer than I've been alive, and he's a guy that's been in the trenches, has rolled up his sleeves, he's cut his teeth, as they say. And I think that we might be hitting sort of where the rubber meets the road here, where I think that there's a lot of traditional old school journalists that don't look at podcasters like myself in the same eyes as they do their contemporaries. Case in point, again, when I went to Rutgers University in New Brunswick, I was a social science guy. I double majored in criminal justice and sociology. I went to work in government. I went to work in criminal justice. Then, obviously, as I went back to grad school, got into academia, teaching in academia. I don't have a journalism degree. And I think some of my peers would say, well, you know what, Uribe is just a podcaster. He's not really a journalist. He calls himself a journalist. It's insulting to us, because that's not really journalism. Podcasting or opinion journalism isn't journalism. And I think that there's still some conflict there, John, that the perception about what people like what I do, as opposed to journalists that have been in the business, whether they start in print with their local paper, move on into bigger institutions. I think there's still some conflict and tension as to whether or not to look at podcasters and opinion journalists under the same lens as traditional journalists. And to me, again, I sort of laugh it off, because I'm like, well, I'm getting traffic. I'm doing a legitimate, program. But some of my contemporaries might say, well, Uribe doesn't have a journalism degree. Uribe didn't go roll up his sleeves at, the Trentonian or the Asbury Park Press or whatever. And I'm sorry. Yeah, he might call himself a journalist, but he just isn't. Are we sort of moving away from that? Or do you think that stigma is going to remain?
Well, it's one of the things that's a unique quality of our system of society, our government, our country, is to be a journalist. You don't have to have a license. You don't have to have a degree in journalism. You just do it. And that is what makes you a journalist. Now, there's a difference between being a reporter, somebody who I would hope is focused on gathering the facts, vetting those facts, and then presenting those facts in as a fair manner as possible, impartial if possible. than people who focus on opinion. But opinion journalists are just as legitimately journalists as the reporters are too. They're just doing a different domain of journalism, but they need to be transparent about the fact that they have a point of view and that they have an opinion. And I think usually they do. I don't think there are too many opinion journalists who would try to pass themselves off and say, well, I'm just reporting the facts. They may do some reporting and part of what they present, but really, I think they need to be clear that they're not the fact-based kind of reporter that's out there on the beat. On the other hand, podcasters can be journalists. Not all podcasters are journalists, but there's nothing wrong with being a podcaster and being a journalist. Why not? It's just another medium that happens to be one that engages a lot of American public, especially younger people now. So I think it's actually a really good vehicle if you want to be a journalist to be a podcaster. Absolutely. But I think you need to think about, well, how do I create quality content? If I'm going to report facts, then how do I get those facts and how do I verify they're accurate? And then if you're going to do opinion, I think it's important to say, well, this is my opinion. Don't pass it off as if this is just factual information. It may be based on some facts. So you can say, I found these 3 things, and this is the basis for my opinion. I think that's a really good thing. But to present it as if it's just straight journalism, in fact, a straight reporting, that would be, I think, a mistake. And I would tell my students that's not being ethical. Want to be honest and transparent about, what you're doing. But podcasting absolutely is a legitimate platform for doing journalism and can be great journalism. Absolutely.
Well said. And I appreciate the vote of confidence there, John, by the way. I kind of want to kind of hear you say that. I'm like, all right, cool. If John Pavlik is saying it, folks, I'm sorry. You got to just get with the program. You know what I'm saying? Like, if JP's laying down the law here, I'm sorry. You're going to have to just go along with it. John, let me ask you this. And again, obviously it's been some weeks. Were there any sort of post-mortem discussions in your classes with students after the election in the sense of the way that, what went wrong for one party over another? Case in point, there was, again, some exit polling. We've seen, Kamala Harris operatives go on podcasts and sort of dissect what happened. And it seems like there's a consensus where the vice president wasn't receptive on going on shows. I mean, case in point, maybe declining the Joe Rogan invitation, where that episode with Donald Trump got viewed by more than 60 million people. Was there any sort of post-mortem dissection in your courses among your students about if Kamala went on Joe Rogan, or if Kamala maybe went on more podcasts instead of The View, which we all know is overly partisan, or I can't stand them. But the point is that, were there any discussions with you and your students about what could have been done better by the losing campaign in this cycle?
Well, we did talk about, things and did that kind of post-mortem analysis, but not necessarily on some of the stuff you were talking about, but you did mention the polls. And I think that's an area where, we had a lot of lively and informed discussion, because it's been a big part of how campaigns are reported by the media for many decades. And it's been an issue, because in many ways it turns the campaigns into a horse race. And it's who's ahead, who's behind, are they closing, and this time, as my students pointed out, a lot of that was based on, different, is it a blue state? Is it a red state? Is it a state that's in play or not? And so much of it was focused on that horse race element. And that's, that doesn't really shed a lot of light on the issues. And so I think my students, many of them would hope that media would focus a little bit more on the positions of the candidates on some of the issues that are so important, because we have a lot of really critically important issues. And if anything happened, maybe there wasn't enough attention by at least one of the parties on the economy and, the issues there. And I think a lot of the public, that was a big issue of concern. So I think sometimes media get a little too caught up on, the horse race side of things. Who's ahead? Who's behind? What does the latest poll say? How does it break down by state? How does it break down by, whether it's a state that's, going to be one that will swing, like a swing state. So I think that, for my students, that was a shortcoming. And I think it may have played to the disadvantage of, maybe the Democrats.
John, I was the only person really in media that was calling this race close in New Jersey. I mean, again, for students of history, obviously, the last time New Jersey had flipped red during a presidential election cycle was 1988 under George H.W. Bush. And since then, Republicans consistently have been losing New Jersey by big numbers, by big margins. As a matter of fact, just looking at numbers here, 2020, Joe Biden won New Jersey by well over 19 points. Hillary Clinton in 2016 and won New Jersey by over 16 points. George W. Bush in 2004 was around 10 points to John Kerry. That was probably the closest since then. Donald Trump came within 5 points of winning New Jersey. How do you explain that? In a state like New Jersey, where there's pockets that, are very blue, like where I live in Hudson County, it's as blue as Windex. But if you look at, some of the data here, we saw a lot of counties flipping, for example, Passaic County, other counties, other municipalities. I mean, there's been sort of a full-blown now tabulation by NJ.com looking at every municipality. You saw the 45th president overperforming a lot in New Jersey, again, coming within 5 points. I said there's a certain element, and not just because I went to the rally in Wildwood in May and I went to the Garden in October for the rally at Madison Square Garden for him. But I mean, and I saw it. I was, obviously videoed and promoted it on my podcast page. But I think that I looked at it, it's like, I think there's an element of people can vote down the ballot at certain, let's say, House seats or local races, but it just seemed like at the top of the ticket, a lot of demographics were gravitating towards the 45th president and obviously soon to be the 47th president-elect. How do you explain what happened in New Jersey with such a close margin at only 5 points?
Well, you're right. It really narrowed a lot from the last presidential election. And that's, really remarkable in many ways. I think there were probably multiple factors that contributed to it. And one of them, I think, was the fact that, when you're in the middle of a campaign and you change, if you want to say, what's the right metaphor, change horses or change the jockey, one or the other, it was a change of a candidate halfway through the 2024. I think that complicated things. And that may have been a factor. And it may be that there was not enough sense that there was going to be change. Sometimes that's all the public wants is change. And they may not have been necessarily voting for, the president-elect as much as they were voting. They just wanted a change. And maybe they weren't hearing enough about change from the Democratic candidate. And so that, I think, was one of the factors as well. And so I think there's a combination of things, but changing of candidate and then maybe not seeing as much differentiation in terms of how things would be different when the public wanted change. And, I think there may be a few other things as well, but all of those things combined, I think, to reduce. Also, I haven't seen the latest numbers, but I think turnout generally was a little lower than it had been under, say, some previous elections. And that may have contributed as well. Plus, people aren't thinking about this so much, but there's a lot of people in New Jersey who are into cryptocurrency.
Okay.
And there was one candidate who really differentiated himself that regard. On the Democratic side, there was a lot of interest in crypto, but it was to regulate it. Then on the Republican side, there was a lot of discussion of crypto, but to try to deregulate it and unleash it and let it, really go. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or not, but that was a differentiating factor. A lot of people in New Jersey who are into finance and into, the cryptocurrency world. And that, I think, was a contributing factor that a lot of people may not be thinking about. I recommended some time ago to news media, if they really wanted to look at ways for new funding models, to think about cryptocurrency and strategies in that regard. And I don't know any of them have. They probably don't even know what I'm talking about.
No, listen, that's totally fair. I actually also want to pick your brain since you mentioned that about, ads for cryptocurrency and everything else. John, I got to tell you, I think that, the Trump campaign was really smart with another ad. And again, as someone who, teaches about communications, information, and media, I mean, you saw it basically. Listen, I'm a big sports fan. I'm not sure if you are, but I watch the NFL every Sunday.
I'm a Packer owner because I grew up in Wisconsin.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
I have one share. My wife bought me one share of the Green Bay Packers.
Okay. I mean, listen, congrats to you. You're having a great season. My Cowboys continue to stink, but the point is that I'm still watching football on Sundays. But consistently, what will we seen on Sundays during Sunday Fun Day? The 1 o'clock game, the 4 o'clock, 8:30 NBC primetime. We kept seeing one consistent ad. And whoever was in charge of this marketing slogan, listen, get them a villa in Italy. Obviously, they did their job. And what did we see, though, John? We saw one ad that really stood out, and it was like, hey, she's for they, them, he's for us. And that marketing, communication, information slogan, I got to tell you, I think that really moved the needle a lot, especially on when I was out, whether it was at home or watching games out with my friends out, for Sunday Fun Day. You couldn't escape those ads, John, during football season. And when we know that the NFL in this country is king, the NFL dominates the ratings over MLB, over NHL, NBA, MLS, whatever. People, tens, if not hundreds of millions, are watching the NFL every Sunday. I just thought that ad.
Too. Streaming. The Packer-Detroit game set a new record for streaming.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And again, not the result you would have liked last Thursday, but sure, you're right. On Amazon, it's certainly.
I don't want to think about that game too much, but I was struck by the fact that it really drew big streaming numbers.
No, sure. And I think, but it was very strategic during, again, the most popular time of the year. People are watching the NFL. And I just looked at that ad, though, John, like, it was powerful in the sense of like the attention it got. And I don't think enough people really give it the flowers that it deserves, in the sense of like, man, you want to talk about a polarizing ad that got attention? I think that was one of the ones that really stood out this election cycle.
That's a good example. I think it'd be good to bring my classes for discussion, because, it didn't seem like, beyond its face, to seem like, oh, this is going to be really, a dramatic kind of ad. But in a subtle way, it was very dramatic. And I think that you're hitting on a really important point, because this whole issue about gender identity has played out in a big way in our society, and it had a big impact, big role in the campaigns. And as you say, that ad did it in really a nuanced way.
It certainly did. Now, again, we moved from one election cycle, and in New Jersey, there's elections every year. There's no off season, as they say here. I mean, obviously, we're going into 2025. There's a gubernatorial race, primaries coming up in June. We'll have legislative races. We'll have a lot of local races. John, what do you think is going to be the responsibility of the media in New Jersey in now covering a second Trump presidency, but more so now this upcoming gubernatorial election? Again, Phil Murphy, thank the Lord, is term limited. So as a homeowner and a motorist, I'm, believe me, I'm not very happy. But the point is that, do you think that there's going to be maybe a change in the way that this gubernatorial cycle is going to be covered in New Jersey? Obviously, the 47th president coming up is not going to be on the ticket per se, but so maybe that energy, that enthusiasm, people got mobilized and motivated to get out and vote. That might not be the case in New Jersey, where low turnouts might dominate both the Republican Party and Democrat Party collectively for these governor races and primaries. Do you think that maybe the effort's going to change in the way that this gubernatorial race in New Jersey is covered now more than ever?
Well, I hope that it is changing. And I think that one way that it should change is to focus on more citizen engagement in the process. And maybe that's a little bit like what Patch has done. But I think to really get a lot of citizens involved in reporting on their local communities, and maybe news media could help get the public properly situated so they get out there as like a force for reporting on their local communities and contribute to what's being reported in general about the political campaigns. So I think that more citizen engagement would be a great thing. And it doesn't have to be with voters. It could be with kids who aren't old enough to vote yet. Get the high schools involved. I've done a number of projects over the years with high schools where the students are absolutely, students in New Jersey are absolutely amazing, from, upstate to downstate to middle of the state. And they're just really brilliant kids and highly motivated. And I think that's a way that this could go, is news media could work with schools to get more kids involved in helping report about what's happening in the state. and work under the tutelage of, say, a journalism professor or a professional editor to make sure that they learn the practices and the principles and the techniques for doing good journalism. And I think that would be a great way to get young people involved, because they care a lot. They really care about the future. If you want to find a group that's, that's really passionate about the future, high school kids, my experience is that they are really very passionate. And so I think that's a resource that news media could tap into, work with schools and work with helping them develop curricula that give kids an opportunity to work as maybe local journalists.
I've seen that a lot locally here nearby. For example, New Jersey City University up here in Hudson County in Jersey City, they've been working with a lot of local high schools when it comes to their media programs and trying to get, Gen Zers motivated, engaged in maybe pursuing this as a profession. We saw a lot of voter engagement. We saw a lot of mobilization within Gen Zers, right? We saw 18 to 25-year-olds really come out this election. Surprisingly, not the numbers I thought. I said, well, it depends, early voting, we'll see. But it seemed like Republicans did a good job in getting some 18 to 25-year-olds over on their side, and obviously, flipping House seats, flipping Senate seats, obviously flipping the presidency, as they say. Now, when we think about programs, not just what Rutgers does, though, John, in general, what do you see maybe is still lacking in communication, media, information programs that maybe still are slow to transition out there?
Well, it's just right up my alley, because I think that there are two arenas that the young are really excited about, and we can do more in terms of what we teach about it in a way that's both critical but also applied. And that is, how are these emerging technologies impacting the world of media, whether it's immersive forms of media like extended reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, and the like. I spoke at a panel on this not too long ago in New Jersey, and there's a lot of interest in that. But also the rise of artificial intelligence and bringing that into our curriculum so that students can learn about the impact, but how to use it ethically and effectively. That's I think really an opportunity. And then there are other emerging media forms as well. We've already talked about podcasting and mobile in general, but there's a lot that we could do to further our curricula in these areas, and the students would respond really well. I did a course for us. It was our first course specifically on AI and the media. It filled up like that. And the students were great, and they did great work in that class. So I think there's a lot more that we can do in that regard.
Gotta tell you, James Cameron, Sarah Connor, the Terminator movies, I mean, they warned us about AI, didn't they?
Absolutely. And there's a lot to be concerned about. These companies are gathering a lot of data, not necessarily, compensating the people who may have the copyright. They may be taking our data, and there's environmental consequences. It costs a lot. It's a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of water to cool these data farms that are doing the AI. So it's got environmental consequences, and students need to learn about all of that. But at the same time, the possibilities are absolutely mind-boggling. So we need to somehow mitigate the problems, but find a way to ethically and effectively use these new technologies like AI in a way that help us do better work. Don't replace us, but help us do better work as journalists, as media professionals, and even as consumers of media.
John, you mentioned about AI. I mean, listen, I'm a big comic book fan. I love watching comic book movies, the adaptations from comic books I've been reading since I was a kid. I would argue one of the biggest dangers about AI is, like, for example, movie trailers. You just sometimes don't know what's real. And unless you're like an avid follower of a specific brand, you can be watching movie trailers on YouTube and you don't know that they're not legitimate. And it drives me crazy because, again, I'm a big Marvel guy. I'm looking forward to the Captain America movie in a couple of months. I'm looking forward to the other Marvel movies coming out in 25 and 26 and 27. But now we're seeing AI literally dominating the landscape where, like, I don't even know what's a real trailer unless I really do my research.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think the public will be upset if they find out they've been misled. So I think that if AI is used in that capacity, it should be clearly labeled so the public understands, and that we're not replacing humans who are, can be great artists in creating wonderful media cultural products like movies or video games or other forms of media content. And when AI is used, it needs to be clearly labeled for what it is, because there are some studies already that show that if you do something with AI and you don't tell the public, the user, they will be very angry and there'll be backlash. So anybody in media who uses AI and doesn't clearly let the public know is risking a lot of trouble.
I'm with you. John, before I let you go, obviously, listen, you're a young man in my eyes. You've been at this business for a long time. You've been great. Obviously, you're doing great work as an academic. You enjoy teaching. Does the question ever come up that, you know what, you've had a great career, you want to relax a little bit, the daily grind of, driving to campus and going and grading papers and reviewing peer articles? I mean, is there a point for John Pavlik where, you know what, I've had a great career and maybe I want to start winding down because, listen, I want to enjoy some free time. I want to enjoy some peace of mind. Is there anything maybe that, has come across your desk or mind that, again, I'm not trying to get you to retire, but is there sort of a thought process about how much longer you want to keep doing this?
Well, absolutely. And I have been doing it for quite a while, but I will say that for me, it is what keeps me, if I am looking relatively young, it's the fact that I get to work with students and they keep me engaged in all the new things and the new developments. That's what helps me stay young emotionally and I think intellectually. So one of my fears is if I retire, man, I think then I would age rapidly because I have some students who are just, they're always saying, "Oh, Professor Pavlik, I have this idea that I want to work on. What do you think of it?" I love that.
Yeah.
I love
creatively.
Yeah, when they're coming up with a new thing about media, I just love seeing their new ideas and how they put it together and how they research it. And I think that, that's just the thing that really gives me purpose and makes me excited every day. I look forward to it. If I reach the point where I'm not feeling that way, that's probably when I retire.
Yeah, when it's not fun anymore, I think maybe that's sort of like the epiphany, right, John, as they say?
Yeah.
Now, real quick, before I let you go here, we've gotten to know John Pavlik, the academic, the professor, the chair of the School of Communication, and at one time. Yes, former. But let's get to know John Pavlik, the guy, the regular guy. So quick lightning round, throw some, some one-word answers, maybe, whatever. A quick lightning round here with John Pavlik. So you already mentioned it before. Obviously, favorite NFL team, the Packers. Who's your favorite Packer?
Jordan Love.
Wow. Okay. All time, really?
Well, no, all time. I guess it would be probably Bart Starr.
Okay.
And favorite coach would have been Vince Lombardi, who's from New Jersey.
Oh, yes, that's right. How do you feel about the Packers' chances going into December and now in January?
I like it. They're looking good. They're on the ascent.
Okay. Favorite MLB team?
Well, when I was a kid, it was the Milwaukee Braves. But because at that time I lived in Wisconsin, but they moved away, and now I'm a Yankees fan.
Okay. NBA team?
Well, I love the Knicks, but I also like the Bucks because grew up in Wisconsin, and my dad took me to a Bucks game. This was back when Lou Alcindor was then transitioning to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and the Bucks won it all. And I was a kid, and we went to a game, and that was awesome. So I still kind of have
that must have been incredible to see Kareem Abdul-Jabbar play in person. What a privilege that must have been. Unbelievable.
It was.
And obviously, Giannis Antetokounmpo may not be a Buck much longer. He may be looking in New York or Brooklyn. Who knows? We'll see. In free agency next season. Favorite cuisine?
Well, that's a good challenging one. I love Thai cuisine. If I had to pick one, it's so flavorful and the wonderful ingredients, and what's not to like about it?
Fair enough. Favorite newspaper to read?
Well, okay, I like the New York Times. It gives me everything all in one place, and it's generally pretty reliable. And they do a lot with WebXR, which is extended reality that you can get on the phone or on your mobile device. And I really appreciate that.
Okay. Favorite American president?
Well, you put me on a tough position here. I guess a Barack Obama.
Okay, fair enough. What stands out about the 44th president?
Is that Obama?
Yeah, what stands out about him? Yeah, what stands out
What
about
stands out is I really appreciated. I thought he brought an optimism that kind of brought the country together in many ways, and I really valued that. And I hope that the next 4 years there's some way that we can start healing the divide. I think that would be, if we can get going in that direction, it would be really nice.
I don't disagree. Listen, I think that there's so much tribalism, John, within our political media and social culture and climate that I think, getting some unity back would not be the worst thing. It's been a very tribal last 4 to 8 years, I think, in many respects. So getting back to some normalcy or some civility wouldn't be the worst thing. What can we look forward to from the School of Communication and Information in 2025? Any big events coming up? Anything that our audience should be made aware of?
Well, we have some exciting kinds of opportunities for our students, certainly. But in terms of kind of things we'll be doing, we'll be involved in bringing speakers to campus throughout the year. And a lot of those will be available online. So I will, when I have some specifics, I don't have a specific thing to share right now, but when I do, I will forward you the link.
Okay. I'm happy to promote it for you. John, I want to thank you for your time. I mean, again, it's such a privilege to talk to you. You've been such a mainstay in the business, not just in academia, but really helping my audience understand and dissect the importance of media, the evolution of it, communications, information, journalism overall. Again, it's a privilege to talk to you. I'm always grateful when I reach out to you that you're always willing to come on. We have great conversations. They're so informative and illuminating. Again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for believing in my brand of journalism. And I want to wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas, a happy holiday season. I'll give you the last word tonight on Real Talk.
Well, thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful holiday season as well. And keep up the good work because, the media are so important in our society. We're a very global society now. And this digital world is what gives us the opportunity to connect all around the world. I just thinking about, everything that's happened in Syria in the last couple of days. I mean, how do we learn about it? Through the media. So I just think that the work you're doing in looking at the disruption that's happening in media, the role that media play it's so important in our lives and how we understand the world. So thank you.
Well, that's very kind of you, John. Folks, he's John Pavlik, distinguished professor at the School of Communication and Information at Rutgers University in New Brunswick. For more information about their program, go to comminfo.rutgers.edu. Make sure you like them on Facebook. Of course, follow them on Twitter and Instagram. I believe that they're both on there. And check it out also on LinkedIn. Great things going on in that program. It starts with my guest tonight. Again, Professor John Pavlik from my alma mater, Rutgers University in New Brunswick. I can't say go Packers, John. I can't say that as a Cowboy fan, but I'm going to definitely follow up with you in January once the brackets come out for the playoffs, and we'll see what happens. We'll see who dethrones the Chiefs in the NFC because I
hope somebody does because they won 2 in a row. That's enough. Let somebody else have a turn.
Well, I mean, it's my understanding that I think many moons ago, Len Dawson beat the Packers, right, in the Super Bowl. Is that right?
Well, I don't think so. I think the Packers won their first 2, and one was against the Chiefs, and one was against the Raiders. But it would be nice to see a little, some new teams in the Super Bowl this year. Would be nice.
I'm with you. Listen, it wouldn't be the worst thing to see Buffalo or whoever instead of the Chiefs in there. I mean, I don't know about you. I'm tired of looking at Taylor Swift every Super Bowl as far as I'm concerned. But again, John, great conversation.
It'd be nice to have some new celebrities in the stand. Yeah.
Are you real quick? Are you concerned that if based obviously on what happened Thursday, tiebreaker purposes, do you feel good that even again it was a close game on Thursday? To your point, it was incredible traffic on Amazon Prime for the first time. A really good Thursday night game because we don't get a lot of those. Okay,
down right to the end, right to the end. I mean, as a fan, you can't ask for more than that. Obviously, a fan of one team, it can be really painful. But as an event, down to the last play is so exciting.
No, and listen, it's a division rival. But do you like your chances in January? Again, if the standings hold on the way they are, the Lions will continue. They'll win the division. They'll have home field. Do you like your chances of the Packers going into Detroit? Again, there's no elements. There's no weather to worry about.
The last time the Packers won the Super Bowl, they went in as a wild card team. I don't need to say more. They were great. The last time they won it all, they went in as a wild card.
That's right. Aaron Rodgers and that 2010 Packer team in 2010. If I remember correctly, I think they went on the road in Philly. Then I believe they beat the Bears in the championship.
In Atlanta. I think they had to play in Atlanta.
That's right. Yes, that's right. That's right. I think they won in Atlanta, then they won in Philly, and then they won in Chicago at the championship game against the great Jay Cutler. My God, what an awful Bears team that was. So, best of luck to you. Have a great holiday season. And once again, John, thank you for joining us here on Real Talk on the Jersey First Television Network. Take care, John. Folks, great stuff there again. Professor John Pavlik from Rutgers University, the School of Communication and Information. There, again, for more information, check out their website, cominfo.rutgers.edu. If you're interested in enrolling or have a family member that's interested in enrolling in great undergraduate programs there, as well as a great graduate program there with the School of Communication and Information at Rutgers University. Again, I'm really, really grateful to John coming on here, and always is a gentleman to really talk about the evolution of media and communication and journalism, and nobody does it better, as far as I'm concerned, than John Pavlik from Rutgers University. Folks, it's 7:13 here on the East Coast. Don't go anywhere, okay? Because I know it's what a lot of you wait for. It's time for final thoughts. And yes, folks, as I've been doing on this show since November the 5th, and what I've been wanting to do is sort of talk about the ongoing Trump derangement syndrome that seems to be resonating throughout New Jersey. Now, again, take your pick in what field, whether it's elected officials, at the state level, at the local level, right? Listen, at the state level, we have a lot of, elected officials that exhibit Trump derangement syndrome in a really sort of frightening way. Like, these are grown adults having temper tantrums like children. Like, for some reason, not getting that extra candy bar at the store, maybe after getting a good report card, and maybe mom and dad wouldn't get that extra candy bar. But again, it's kind of demoralizing and alarming to see grown adults having meltdowns about the reelection of Donald Trump. Right? The idea, oh my God, the end of democracy, or the rise of fascism. None of that's happening, folks. And unfortunately, again, listen, there's no shortage of guilty parties here, right? Obviously, we see there Antoinette Miles from the New Jersey Working Families Party, obviously, Miss Photogenic herself, certainly there having meltdowns about what the 47th president potentially may be doing with deportations. Well, God forbid we enforce, immigration law, and God forbid we enforce our borders. You would think that Antoinette Miles would be more worried about that, instead of worrying about, what's being, whether or not what she's ordering from Uber Eats, or whether or not she's going to Shake Shack for the 5th time in a week, right? Or, for example, obviously the notorious Trump derangement syndrome propagandists like Alan Steinberg and Tom Moran, who, by the way, I think it's December 9th. Yes, folks, with less than 60 days to go until Tom Moran is unemployed. Bye-bye, Tom. Good riddance. Obviously, we've seen Tom a little quiet lately, and thank the Lord, it took unemployment to finally silence Tom Moran, what we've seen. And of course, folks, when we talk about other TDS exhibitors, obviously we have useless people in New Jersey like Bob Medina. I mean, folks, let's be honest. I mean, Jesus Christ, is there a more useless guy in New Jersey activism than Bob Medina? Maybe his wife, but more on her later. Or whether the Latino Action Network, or even, misguided academics like Micah Rasmussen from the Rebovich Institute down there in Rider University. I mean, again, God forbid, who's dressing Micah for TV appearances? Stevie Wonder? Clearly. But again, we've had our fair share of TDS sycophants in New Jersey media, academia, activism, whatever you want to call it, whether it's Sarah Kalani from, Make the Road New Jersey, obviously other insufferable, really hyper hysterics like Maria Rodriguez-Gregg and Laura Bustamante. I mean, again, women that think they have it so bad in New Jersey when they're earning 6 figures And let's be honest, like, really, your lives aren't that bad, but you're still bitching and moaning, which is, again, it's like you live to bitch and you bitch to live. It's kind of demoralizing, folks. There's a reason why they're single, but that's another conversation, right? Or again, we have other propagandists like Charles Style with the Bergen Record, or other insufferable feminists and cat ladies like Amy Torres, the executive director of the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice. Folks, another insufferable left-wing organization that doesn't care about protecting you from, illegal immigration or the harmful effects of illegal immigration. No, Amy Torres would just rather gallivant around and, go to Starbucks and get her third, cappuccino of the day than actually doing real work. Like the rest of us that actually work for a living, right? Not just sitting around virtue signaling, right? Or other journalistic, let's be honest, who live to virtue signal, and whether it's Max Pizarro and the sinking ship that is Insider NJ, or Uncle Dave with NJ Spotlight News that, again, continues to virtue signal or make excuses for illegal immigration or coddle illegals with his rhetoric, or other propagandists like Hetty Rosenstein, a lifelong civil servant that's never really had a real job. But again, this sufferable cat lady will tell you that she thinks she knows more than you do. That's complete bullshit, but that's Hetty Rosenstein, right? Okay. Or other, attorneys that masquerade as columnists like Alan Levin, working at Insider NJ. Again, I wouldn't trust this guy to represent me in a traffic stop in municipal court, but somehow his political takes are to be taken seriously. Come on, get out of here. Or other useless women in New Jersey media like Jay Lassiter. Again, a guy who sits around living off, his husband's money and writes one column and publishes one power list a year. Yeah, really, really, exhausting life, Jay. Living down there in Cherry Hill. I mean, again, bro, like, this is a guy who, let's be fair. I mean, when you think about a work ethic, you don't think about Jay Lassiter. And speaking about not having a work ethic, of course, we can think about Ron Dellinger, who, by the way, bye-bye, Ronnie, February 1st, he'll also be unemployed. Good riddance to Ron Dellinger, or other insufferable journalists like Bob Hennelly, a frequent columnist at Insider NJ. All right. Or, for example, other insufferable activists that live to corrupt children, right? Like Lauren Albrecht, Miss Photogenic herself, working at Gar State Equality, who seems to be so obsessed with, if people are misgendered or fixated on rights for trans people. Folks, luckily, New Jerseyans and the rest of the state are waking up to all this trans insanity. Okay? Because what we're seeing are grown adults who are mentally ill, who are trying to just engage in make-believe and dress up as make-believe and make sure that you either go along with the agenda or we're going to shame you or we're going to try to cancel you. Lauren, by the way, honey, no one's canceling me. I know you might want to try to do that. Good luck, honey. You might have a better luck going to Shake Shack and maybe getting a different burger, but canceling me, I don't think so, sweetheart. You can try, though. Like many have attempted, you're going to find out you're going to be on the losing end of that one. Again, you can't spell an L without Lauren, can't spell Lauren Albrecht without an L. Right? But these are the types of insufferable people we've had to deal with on our newsfeed since the re-election of Donald Trump. And thank the Lord, folks, in 56 days, we'll get back to normalcy and some sort of competency in the White House. What did we see last week in Africa? We saw Joe Biden, the 46th president, falling asleep, okay, in a meeting with other world leaders. Did you notice the difference over the weekend in Paris at the Notre Dame Cathedral? The way people were gravitating to the 47th president? Folks, that's strong leadership, okay? That's a strong presence on the world stage. Okay, something that none of these clowns have known for the last 4 years, because these are the same clowns who will blatantly lie to you and tell you that Joe Biden's doing cartwheels behind closed doors during staff meetings in the Oval Office, that he's helping, the kids that, obviously staff members with the trigonometry homework because he's so mentally sharp. Folks, it was complete bullshit. But again, you would think by listening to these fools that Joe Biden was somehow this competent president, and his vice president, who turned out to be the biggest joke in U.S. electoral history, in raising $1 billion, in being $20 million in debt, okay? And guess what? She was about as successful as I was in winning primary votes, just like she did, right? Or lack thereof. But again, folks, these are the people that think they're so much smarter than you. And it's not even about degrees, because there might be some people on this list behind me who don't have degrees. But it's this sort of arrogant, smug, condescending, think I'm better than you, like aura of scumbag entitlement, which is what all of these exemplify. Okay. Who somehow will tell you that they know more than you. Not so much because of degrees, but because they've been in the trenches or because of experiences. They're going to blatantly lie to you and tell you that they know what's good for you. And when I think of someone who, let's be honest, exemplifies the title of being a grifter and a propagandist, well, folks, let's be very fair. It's the Latina Civic PAC. Okay. Now, let me just give you some perspective here as the Latina Civic Action announced their new slate of officers, right? And of course, no conflict of interest by Insider NJ, because we know that Patricia Campos Medina has given money to Insider NJ to push either her podcast, which was an absolute disaster. Folks, what an abject failure. Okay. Patricia, leave it to the professionals that actually get traffic. Okay. The only traffic when it comes to podcasts, or the only traffic is maybe what's on Route 35 after you get off the Garden State Park. Because when it comes to traffic on your shows, you don't know anything about it. Unlike this show, where on this show, it's real traffic because it's real talk. Right. And again, when I read this slate of new officers, this is really, really funny. Right. So, press release by Insider NJ, which is pretty much all they're really good for. I mean, they're not publishing good news. They're not publishing, reputable news or accurate news. They're publishing propaganda pieces, somehow telling you that the editorials that are well thought out and well researched. That's bullshit. We all know that Max Pizarro does have an original thought in his head. And of course, it starts with the boss at Insider NJ, that's Peter Nelly. And I feel bad for Mike and Ryan Graham, two good guys. Mike, who I actually ran into at the League of Municipalities, who, again, he and I have still a good amount of respect for each other. And I still respect Mike, and I still respect Ryan, and I respect the Graham family. What I don't respect is our lack in judgment in continuing to employ clowns like Max Pizarro and Peter Nelly. But more on them. Right? Here's a good one. So December 5th, Latina Civic Action, New Jersey's leading statewide Latina organization. That's complete bullshit. That's New Jersey's leading statewide Latina organization. And what? And bitching and moaning, and tiki-tiki, and jodiendo. That's what they're good at. That's what they lead in New Jersey. And I mean, I can't imagine anything else. Who are seeking to increase Latino representation in government and politics, announced its new slate of officers for 2025. Oh, joy. My goodness. Insufferable feminists and unbearable cat ladies being announced to the executive board. Here we go. Here's a really good one, folks. Latina Civic Action advocates for the rights of Latinas to have a seat at the table in government and politics so that Latino community can have a voice in enacting policies that encourage economic opportunity, equity, and inclusion across all areas of society in New Jersey. Kind of interesting, right? That Patricia and the rest of these clowns and this executive board kind of took away the Latinx nonsense because they kind of see the writing on the wall. We're tired of this. Being Hispanic myself, there's Latino and Latina. There's no Latinx. Can we stop with the virtue signaling, gender identity bullshit? Because this is what Patricia Campos Medina and the rest of these fools live. But more on that later. The organization is excited to welcome the new executive committee and excited to see their contributions fulfill the mission of Latina Civic Action. Latina Civic Action Executive Committee, Patricia Campos Medina for president, Flora Castillo, vice president of finance. I wouldn't trust this woman to run a Target or a Costco, and somehow they even trusted her to be the vice president of finance. Interesting. Oh, here's a good one. Cristina Pinzon, vice president of membership. Folks, esta come mierda, that obviously we all know doesn't excel in mathematics. I think we've all learned that. Thank you to David Wallstein for pointing that out, right? In a recent campaign in West New York, Cristina Pinzon. Esta pendeja can't even manage a Walmart. Really? You're gonna, like, how is she going to increase membership? Please explain to me. When I look at a flyer, and if Cristina Pinzon is going to convince you, oh, by the way, join Latina Civic PAC. Really? Folks, that's not exactly the most photogenic example I would use to try to improve membership enrollment, right? Milagros Camacho, secretary who? Lucia Gomez, treasurer. I mean, listen, I don't mind Lucia. She's not an awful person like the rest of these clowns preceding her. But I mean, come on, Lucia, do better. Why would you want to be involved with this garbage organization? Here's a good one here. The Board of Latino Civic Action wants to thank interim president Flora Castillo for her leadership and service. What? Leadership and service for what? To bitch and moan and to coddle the illegals? Is this what Latino Civic Action is all about? Really? What exactly? Could someone please explain to me what leadership and service? Right? This was really fun. As the interim president, Flora Castillo took the helm as president of Latino Civic Action last year from founding president Patricia Campos Medina, while she stepped down as an officer to run a historic election. A historic election. You got your ass kicked, Patricia. Gee, and you can't even get the numbers right when it comes to how badly you lost it in the primary. As the first woman candidate to officially appear on a ballot to represent New Jersey in the United States Senate, she earned second place behind Andy Kim. Well, when you're running next to Larry Ham, I mean, really? It's like saying, gee, I don't know, what's better to get, syphilis or chlamydia? Like, that's the choices you had, folks, in the Democrat primary for the United States Senate. Okay? Gee, Larry Ham or Patricia Campos Medina. Gee, I don't know. Do I want syphilis or do I want chlamydia? Gee, I'm telling you, what great choices we have here, folks. I mean, really? During last year, Latina Civic led key efforts to engage Latinas in the political process. That's bullshit. When all you care about is pushing the Latinx agenda and all your other woke nonsense. In addition to, of course, always wanting to coddle illegals and certainly, again, not really caring about the harm that illegal immigration does to us on a daily basis, right? Okay. Here we go. Patty Campos Medina, quote, I'm excited to return as president of Latina Civic. To do what? To scratch your ass? You're not doing anything else. To continue to build on our legacy. Legacy of what? De comiendo mierda. Give me a break. To advocate for Latino representation. Oh, now it's Latino representation. I thought it was Latinx representation at all levels of government. Right? Let me just finish this part here. This is really good. Latina Civic Action is an opportunity for Latinas to have a voice and a seat at the table in government roles and able to represent the community we respect with respect, seriousness, and responsibility. Folks, you see, this is a blatant lie. Because again, they're telling you Latina Civic Action is an opportunity for Latinas to have a voice and seat at the table in government roles and be able to represent the community with respect, seriousness, and responsibility. Que respeto, que seriousness, and que responsibility. How can I take you seriously when all you do is espouse left-wing woke nonsense? Really? With respect, seriousness, and folks, these are not serious people right behind me. They're just not serious people. When I think about this new executive board, folks, you know what comes to mind? Oh my God, folks! You know what? Let's watch that again because it's so enjoyable to see the level of just foolishness that this organization embodies, and it starts with this executive board. Oh my God, stop the pain. I wouldn't trust these women to, again, manage a hot dog stand in the dead of... These women would F up a lemonade stand in the sweltering heat. That is how the level of incompetence, folks, okay, that these women exemplify is downright scary. Okay? They would F up, again, a lemonade stand in the middle of a heat wave. That is the level of ineptitude and incompetence that we're dealing with here. Especially Cristina Pinzon. Again, this, oye, mija, you got to pick up a mathematics book. Okay? It's hard to take you seriously. It really is. Whether you're on stateside affairs or you're on this executive board, what exactly is Cristina Pinzon going to do, for example, to further membership, to motivate people to want to join? How? Like, folks, I don't trust this woman to manage a checkbook. I'm going to trust her with trying to increase membership. Good luck with that one. Again, folks, when we think about inseparable feminists, unbearable cat ladies, annoying Latinas, which we all know a lot of them are. Let's be honest. I mean, I love my mom. She's Latina. I love my aunt. She's Latina. My best friend's Latina. But let's be honest. A lot of Latinas, ustedes joden mucho. And folks, it starts with this executive board here. So if anyone's good at jodiendo, it's these clowns because they live for this. They live to joder. Again, they live to bitch and they bitch to live. And that's what's disappointing, folks. Because there are a lot of good Latinas out there working in politics. There are a lot of good Latinas working in advocacy. There are a lot of Latinas out there trying to work and fulfill their civic duty. There's a lot of them out there. I can name a lot of them. But, folks, here's a spoiler alert. They're not it. Folks, we got serious problems in New Jersey. And we need serious people to solve them. And the truth is, these aren't serious people. They never were. And here's another spoiler alert. They never will be. And it's pretty sad for anyone to put them up on a pedestal. And I get it, people like Bob Medina, Patty, Patty's husband, another downright embarrassment, going to campaign events, getting kicked out of campaign events because he can't conduct himself. And it's tragic because you would think that Bob Medina, who's like 93 years old, ya a este punto de su vida, que ya está a punto de morirse ya, at 93 years old, folks, he's at the twilight, as they say, of life. You would think that Bobby would have the capacity to just conduct himself with a little more integrity and decorum and civility. Again, folks. And I get it. I understand why he's so loyal to Patty. I mean, let's be honest. Again, he married the first piece of ass that gave him ass. That's who Bob Medina is. Okay? And what do we get for it? We get embarrassing tantrums in public, at campaign events, at the League of Municipalities. Okay? And of course, what do we see his wife do? Well, she continues to embarrass Latinas with insufferable takes, failures when it comes to podcasting, and failures electorally. I don't know what Patty's going to do in 2025, but let's hope she doesn't run for any more elected office. Let's hope she doesn't host another podcast. And let's hope she can at least try to be somewhat credible by being the president of Latino Civic Act. Ay, Dios mío. You want to talk about something that's unbearable and insufferable? Folks, it's these ladies right here with the Latino Civic Act. And it's tragic because, you would think that at their age, they would know the importance about decorum, civility, integrity. Yeah, they don't know that. These are big words for these girls. Yeah, they might have to work on that in 2025. And those are my final thoughts. Folks, before I call it a night here, once again, I want to thank all of you who continue to make Real Talk a success here on the Jersey First Television Network. Great month of November, 72,000 plus views and counting, folks. All organic, nothing boosted. Okay, no paid ads. I don't need that stuff. So when these little Mickey Mouse journalists in New Jersey with Mickey Mouse traffic are trying to make you believe that they're informative, they're not, folks. You know who is informative? This show. You know who's informative? This guy. You know what's going to continue to be informative? Jersey First TV. And folks, that's why I work so hard for you, to make sure that I bring you reputable commentary, insightful analysis, and again, educational breakdowns about what's going on in our political landscape. Not just in New Jersey, but nationally. Folks, you can always rely on Real Traffic because it's always here on Real Talk. And that's our show for this week, folks. Once again, I want to thank John Pavlik, distinguished professor at Rutgers University at the School of Communication and Information. Once again, folks, we appreciate you supporting us here. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, of course. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. And also, don't forget to check us out on YouTube. Like, comment, and share on the program. And of course, wherever you get your podcasts on Spotify or SoundCloud, download Jersey First and take us with you every single day. Whether you're doing errands, Christmas shopping, taking the kids to school, volleyball practice, piano recitals, whatever. We know you're tuning in to Real Talk. Of course, all the great programming at Jersey First TV. Speaking of great programming, once again, folks, check out brand new episodes of the Nader Narrative every Thursday, hosted by the outstanding Elizabeth Nader. And brand new episodes of Bridging the Gap with AJ Malillo and Stephen Rambola premiere every Thursday as well. And brand new episodes of Real Talk with Fernando Uribe premiere every Monday night. Check your local listings, of course. And folks, I can't say enough how grateful I am to all of you that continue to make Real Talk the success that it is in 2024 and will continue raising hell in 2025. Always remember, ladies and gentlemen, if it's unbiased, unfiltered, and unafraid, it's always Real Talk right here on the Jersey First Television Network. I am New Jersey's premier award-winning, and now 10-time award-winning journalist, top Latino, as voted on by the Latino Spirit online magazine, along with the United States Latino Affairs Initiative, and so that'll continue to be the weapon of mass disruption in Garden State media, because my level of honesty, folks, now more than ever, is truly necessary in this era of journalistic deception. That's right, folks. It is me, Fernando Uribe, the generational talent in New Jersey media. And folks, you know what? With the level of ineptitude and incompetence with the establishment media in New Jersey, I get it. It's easy to lose faith in how we get our news and how we get reputable opinions. But you know what? Never fear, because on this show, I'm leading the way. Trust me, folks. Believe in me. I'm the hero you need right now in media. Believe me, I will lead us. And I'll continue doing that well into 2025. That's right, folks. It's me, Fernando Uribe. Again, the people's choice and the people's voice here on Jersey First TV. I want to thank you all once again, folks. Please party responsibly. Bundle up this week. Again, enjoy all the great holiday festivals, all the great holiday parties. Again, please party responsibly. Take an Uber or Lyft if that doesn't permit. And of course, shout out to my aunt celebrating her birthday this past weekend. Of course, my good buddy Aaron Dragone also celebrating her birthday. Shout out to Matt Hatter, Green Rock, and all the great establishments in Hoboken, as well as Wicked Willie's in New York City. Good to see some people I haven't seen in quite some time, folks. Again, enjoy the rest of your week. I can't say enough, folks. Thank you so much for supporting the program. Thanks for stopping by. And always remember, again, now more than ever, folks, we have to remember that when it comes to media, what we're doing here on Real Talk on the Jersey First Television Network is we're leading the way in helping you get trust back in how we get our news and how we get our opinions. And folks, it starts right here, because it's always real traffic, because it's Real Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in here, folks. Always remember, stay classy, everyone.